I'm only going to feature one game from round 6 of the Norway Chess Tournament, and that is the encounter between Veselin Topalov and Vladimir Kramnik. Since their World Championship match in 2006, these players have a visceral loathing of each other. Of course, in that match there were allegations of gamesmanship and cheating. In their recent games in the Candidates Tournament, they won one apiece, and those games were wild affairs. They always really go for each other. And before this game, well, Kramnik was asked about their encounter, and he said that he wouldn't be shaking hands with Topalov. "I just don't respect him as a person," said Kramnik. And Topalov was asked what he would do if he were offered a handshake, and he said, well, that situation would be purely hypothetical. So, under these edgy circumstances, the players sat down to play with certainly no handshake, which is of course standard tournament etiquette. So, Topalov with the white pieces opened with d4. Now, I mentioned their games in the Candidates Tournament, and that was a Queen's Gambit that Kramnik played there. Today he played a Nimzo, okay, a very respectable opening, and Topalov did something slightly unusual with this line, with Rook c1. It has been seen before, but yeah, it's slightly non-standard. So let me get to the first critical moment in the game. So far things are absolutely normal. Now here I think I would say perhaps the standard move is e3. But Topalov exchanged on f6, and I have to say I don't particularly like that move. It seems to me that it frees Black's game. Black has very easy development now. Queen stands excellently on f6, looking at this central square, but it can also play actively on the king side. Topalov took on d5. And now here, I think a normal move for Black would just be to recapture the pawn on d5. And in fact, this is a direct transposition into another opening, the so-called Ragozin system. But normally, White would have the move here. Here it's Black's move. I don't think Black has any difficulties here at all. Very nice development. White's king has yet to castle. And I think against any other player, Kramnik would have played in exactly this fashion. But there's something about Topalov that kind of brings out a certain recklessness in Kramnik. He somehow feels he really has to go for it. So he played here Rook to d8. Okay, Topalov continued playing very standard, normal moves. So you can see this is Kramnik's idea. He's brought the Rook into play immediately. Now here, of course, it's still possible for Black to put the brakes on and exchange here and, say, play bishop d7 or something like this, although the Rook looks slightly odd here, but this would be playable. But of course, that was not Kramnik's idea. His idea in playing this Rook out at such an early stage was to sacrifice the exchange. Now, it's very enterprising, but let's see how this works out. Okay, Topalov brings out his bishop. He has to get castled. Queen f4, hitting the Rook down here. White castles, and now knight takes d4. Of course, White can't take the bishop because Black would win the queen with a discovered check. So Topalov is forced back with his queen. Now, probably Kramnik got about this far, thought this is reasonable compensation for Black. So he exchanged here. Now, of course, that bishop is en prise, so White has to play Rook takes bishop. Now, if knight takes, then White wins back the piece, and that's just very good for White. So instead, Kramnik played e5. Now, as I said, I think Kramnik would have got about this far and thought he had reasonable compensation for the exchange. He has a knight and a pawn for the Rook, and this knight is very well established in the centre of the board. But I think his judgment was at fault, because little by little Topalov fights back. Now, first of all, this bishop comes to an excellent diagonal, and it's this point, f7, that is going to be the bane of Kramnik's life over the next few moves. That is a sensitive point. Kramnik's problem is that it's very hard to generate play on the king side while this rook stands excellently on the third rank, covering all these squares. And Topalov, I think, plays very well at this point. First of all, he drives back the queen. Now, the problem for Kramnik is that every exchange is going to help Topalov. So he has to move back with his queen. Now, this allows Topalov to find his feet. So he's repositioned his queen, he's centralized, and there are no real structural weaknesses for white. Looks very solid. Okay, Kramnik puts his bishop on this long diagonal. Now, in combination with the knight, this looks excellent. But Topalov reacts very well. He just brings his bishop round to exchange off this active bishop. So every exchange is going to help white here. Now, perhaps Kramnik should have exchanged here. Probably he was worried about a later entry of the rook into the 7th rank. I think he's right to be worried, but I think this is probably black's best. Instead, Kramnik, tried to keep the pieces on the board, but now you can see that in doing this, the bishop is decentralized, and this bishop is excellent. It's going to come back to this diagonal any second to attack f7. So, okay, first of all, the rook is attacked. It comes over. Now, white wants to play the rook to the 7th rank. White's moves are very easy here, and it's Kramnik that starts to improvise. But really, it's rather dubious. Okay, and now he solidifies the bishop, but it's not the best diagonal. Excellent move from Topalov, b3. Of course, if this is taken, then white gets through on the 7th rank, and f7 is going to cave in. Bishop d5 is still a threat. Now, I think this is an outright mistake from Kramnik. I think he should have played his rook here to defend the pawn on f7. Instead, he plays rook d8. He must have thought that he was preventing bishop d5, but Topalov plays exactly the move that Kramnik was trying to prevent. If rook takes bishop, Kramnik must have simply overlooked this tactic, and the queen checks and then picks up the rook, winning position. Let's go back. So now Kramnik in desperate trouble with both these pieces attacking f7, and you can see that black's queen is miles away from the action, and all white's pieces look good. Okay, a check from Kramnik, and he brings his knight at least to this square on f4. But still, really, I think objectively, black is lost. Kramnik is improvising now. He's had to switch this knight around, and here I think Topalov doesn't play as accurately as he might have done. Bishop c4 is the clearest move, and if bishop takes, then white plays queen takes pawn. So the f pawn has gone, and now white can attack g7, and let's say rook g8, well, just queen takes f1. White's clear exchange up, completely winning position. Instead, Toppy played queen b6. It looks as though he's in complete control here. It looks as though his king side is completely solid, but Kramnik misses now an amazing shot. Now, this is a real computer move. Really difficult to spot this kind of thing in a game. What on earth is this knight doing? Well, of course it would like to play this kind of smothered mate. Okay, white takes. Black is a whole rook down. And now this amazing move, bishop e2, threatening bishop f3. Now, in order to cover this square, white has to play queen here. And now queen here reinstates the threat of bishop f3 check. And amazingly, there is only one decent move for white here. If, for example, rook up, then that fails to check, and even a mate on f1. So white actually has to give up this bishop to cover f3. And black takes. Okay, black is still the exchange down, but this is very annoying. The bishop can sink itself on f3. Now white is still better here, but this is very hard work to win. So an amazing shot, but very difficult to spot that move. Instead, Kramnik played king h7, but now white's king is absolutely safe after this move h3. And well, now it was incredibly easy to win. Now we're back in on normal lines. The game has resumed its normal course. Topalov broke in. And well, let me just go through these last few moves, but it's just desperate. Obviously, Kramnik's king is in desperate trouble, and I think it was, well, sheer inertia that kept him playing on here. This position, of course, is absolutely resignable, but Kramnik playing to the bitter end. He just doesn't want to give up here. And finally, after rook d1, exchanging more pieces, Kramnik decided enough was enough and he resigned the game. So Kramnik was leading, but that blows the tournament right open. I should say that all the other games were drawn. Magnus Carlsen drew fairly quickly, obviously very tired after his marathon encounter with Aronian yesterday. So the scores after 6 rounds, 3 players now leading: Kramnik, Carlsen and Caruana on 3.5 points. In fact, only 1 point separates all the tournament participants. So with 3 rounds to go, anyone could still win the tournament.